Hi everyone, welcome. Jerrel here. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what's going on with Silver Falls. Um, so I'm just finishing up Undertakers now. Um, I'll be submitting that to Nintendo pretty soon, but I'm just sort of finishing up um, the the sort of extra mode outside of the story mode of Undertakers. There's a bit of sort of an arcade action style game, and when you connect Undertakers to the other Silver Falls games, you'll get some character unlocks and some weapon unlocks, and you will get to use those characters and weapons in these sort of extra arcade mode that's a bit actiony and quite. It's a bit more fun. So you probably only play through the story mode maybe once or twice, and then when you want a bit of some classic arcade action, you go over to that extra mode. And so people seem to be pretty interested with Deadly Shadows. So I guess I'd talk a little bit about Deadly Shadows. So it's not like a huge, epic, long story. It's I guess it's sort of a shorter story because I don't want to drag it out. It's not a kind of story that you sort of put fetch quests in there to pad the runtime, and so it's more efficient with its storytelling because it's a kind of a very localized series of events. But the main draw of Deadly Shadows is the cool enemies that are in it, and I don't want to spoil too much because the fun of the game is playing it and then getting to experience the enemies yourself. But it's not going to be a typical oh, I'm going to run through a forest and shoot some zombies. Or it's definitely not that. So the enemies in Silver Falls Deadly Shadows, which is still in development, it's not likely that it will make it to the 3DS. But if we can get a Switch development going, then it will probably be one of the first titles that we put on the Switch. So the enemies in Deadly Shadows are going to be pretty much impervious to all attacks until you use some sort of flammable liquid. So you have to coat the enemies with a flammable liquid, and then you have to set them on fire, and you have to burn off layers of their armor, and then you can damage them with traditional weapons. So enemy encounters in Deadly Shadows are going to be quite dangerous, and because the game isn't very long, each enemy encounter could be a game over pretty quickly if you're not ready and properly equipped to deal with that. And it's going to be very much like a slasher horror kind of game, and it will lean more into the horror and less about character drama as Three Down Stars was. And I hope that's not a disappointment to people, but I want to be upfront and let you know that every game in this series is going to be quite different from each other because I don't want the games to stagnate, and I want players to feel like there's something fresh and interesting and new whenever there's another Silver Falls games. So yeah, Deadly Shadows, that it's probably going to be one of the first games we bring to Switch if we can get Switch development. I've sent Nintendo the pitch for Silver Falls, and I've requested a development kit. I'm still waiting to hear back from them. Meanwhile, yeah, I've finished Undertakers, and well, it's mostly finished. I haven't finished the extra game mode. So I'll be doing testing, I'll be finishing the extra game mode, and then I have to keep into account all the games that I have planned coming up in the future, and I have to make sure that all of those games already have content lined up in Undertakers. And it is quite challenging for Undertakers because that game is set in the 70s, and the majority of games that I have planned for Silver Falls take place close to Three Down Stars. And so there are characters who would not have been alive in the 70s. They weren't born yet. So that makes things a little bit challenging. So it pushes me to be a bit more creative with the unlock content that will be in Undertakers. But it still absolutely will connect to every other game that we have planned. And in terms of sort of writing and creating stuff for Silver Falls, I tried to write and create stuff with the approach of what would be interesting that hasn't been done yet. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. I'm such a Resident Evil guy. And and I haven't even got to play Resident Evil 2, and truth be told, I will not even have a chance to play Resident Evil 3. That absolutely is a bummer for me, because I was one of the biggest, ever since Resident Evil, ever since the first remake came out, I was always saying, oh man, I've got to have they got to remake 2 the same way, they got to remake 3. Then, my friends always said, oh, they're never going to make remake 3, they don't even like 3. And I said, no, one day they'll do it, So I actually couldn't believe when they announced 3 and then suddenly launched it. And I'm so busy with development, I'm not actually going to get a chance to play it. I put in like 2 hours into Resident Evil 7, and I didn't get to finish it. I didn't get to finish pretty much any game that I've played because I have so much work that I do with my stuff. But it's very easy to accidentally make a ripoff of something that you love and you're passionate about. So with Silver Falls, at the forefront of my mind was, what can I create that people aren't going to get anywhere else, that gamers aren't going to get anyone else? If I made a zombie game, it would just be a worse ripoff of Resident Evil. And if I made some sort of bizarre psychological horror game where stuff manifests out of your, deeper inner fears or whatever, then it would just be a worse ripoff of Silent Hill. So with Silver Falls, my objective with that was to create interesting character stories and an intensely deep lore that players can continue to explore game after game after game after game, and see these characters and how they interact with each other, how these characters change and grow, and how they react to the world around them, and how they deal with alien abductions. And you might see some characters are in denial about UFO contact and alien abductions, and some characters actively searching out and trying to find the truth, and what happens to them when they try to find that truth. And I think that's something players won't get anywhere else at this point in time, and I think that's an interesting way to tackle characters and stories. And it's a difficult approach, because I can't just say, bam, zombies, look at that, you know what zombies are, you know what you're going to get. And I can't just say, ooh, it's this horrible psychological thriller thing with monsters, they're scary, they come out of your inner psyche. I can't do that. And I can't fully explain what the games are, or at least 3 Down Stars, without totally spoiling it. So it's an interesting challenge from a writing standpoint, because it means I have to push and extend myself to come up with a concept that's interesting, and not just interesting on saying it out loud and sitting at a coffee table and saying, yeah, okay, this is my idea now. But I have to expand on that and make sure that concept continues to deliver. And as a writer, that's such a great challenge, because you're pushing yourself as a creative artist, and I've become a much better writer because I've worked on Silver Falls, because I really pushed myself, and I thought, well, I've got to be able to make these stories interesting, and if these stories take place over multiple games, how am I going to keep that interesting? And I'll just bring up, I actually, it's a lot of fun writing for Silver Falls. I'm just trying to bring something up on my phone here now. Where have I got this? Is this it? Nope, that's not it. Here we go. So I don't just write, people who have played 3 Down Stars, and I hope you guys are enjoying it, probably noticed the immense amount of lore and detail that's in that world so far. And I've spent literally hundreds of hours writing out very, very small details that exist in the background of this world. For example, I've written out a couple dozen cartoons that existed, and I define what decade these cartoons are from. So I have cartoons from, let's see, I have comic book characters from the 40s, I have cartoons from the 60s onward, I have sci-fi series. So say, for example, we have some 80s cartoons here. Let's see, there's Justice Man and the Warriors of Freedom, popular kids cartoon toy line from the 70s and 80s, based on a mix between medieval high fantasy and post-war inspiration. There's let's see, this one makes me laugh. There's Captain Bang, Bang with an exclamation mark. And it says, in Western fiction and media, it's one of the first superhero comic book characters from the 40s. His friends include the Cartwheel Kid, Yombo the Indian, Sheila the Pirate, Soldier the Dog, and Full Moon the Noble Horse. In fact, those are... so whoever named Soldier, the item dog who carries your items, actually named Soldier after the dog from Captain Bang, who was one of Captain Bang's friends. So there's just so many details like that. And here's some 90s cartoons. There's Spin Dragons, a top battling game and cartoon franchise from the 90s. There's Blader Bears from Jupiter's, another cartoon from the 90s about hypermuscular anthropomorphic bears who ride rollerblades, featuring Butch, Jacker, Hard Rod, and Grip. They were extremely popular. So, the notes go on and on and on and on and on. So there's tons of detail in there. And it not only ties into... It's not just something fun to look at and go, that's cute, but it ties into characters' personalities in that you'll find, as you're playing through the games, you'll find characters who like or dislike certain movies or book series or cartoons based on that character's personality, and it lets you learn more about certain characters. You might think a character is a certain way, but then you find out, they actually like this cartoon, and this other character also likes that cartoon, and so they might share some traits. Or you might see that certain characters are friends with other characters in town because they share an interest in a certain genre or a hobby and things like that. Anyway, I'm sort of just rambling now, so I hope everyone out there is safe. Look after yourselves and your family, and if you are starting to feel lonely because of the whole isolation thing, I don't know, you can shoot me a message on social media or whatnot, and you can chat about games. I'm happy to chat with anyone about games. So thanks for listening. I'll check in again in a couple days and hopefully have something fun to talk about anyway. So stay safe out there, and thank you for your support for playing Silver Falls. I really appreciate that, and we'll see you in Silver Falls.